So my name is Allie and welcome to my channel. So I talked about this video a while ago when I was talking about my reading the 1-star reviews of my favorite books video, and I decided that I really wanted to read some of the 5-star reviews for books that I've DNF'd. So I've DNF'd quite a few popular books that I just don't know if I should get into, or maybe I don't even really have any intention of getting back into them, but I would love to see why people love them, and I really want them to maybe convince me to try them again and give them a second chance. So I've chosen 3 different books that I have DNF'd, and I'm going to go read those 5-star reviews for you right now. Again, I have my computer in front of me. Sorry about the glare from the computer in my glasses. I don't think it's gonna be that bad. I'll try to have my face away from the computer screen. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to be doing is The Wrath in the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. And I DNF'd this book I think a few years ago. I tried to read it, I just couldn't get into it. And I don't think I'm ever going to read it, but I mean, I still have it on my shelf, so maybe I can get into it at some point in the future. So one of the top reviews in the 5-star category is just so good. And I'm just okay, that's okay. Another review says, I am in awe. This beautiful journey, this journey of longing, magic, and love sang to my soul, gave me wings, spilled vibrant colors in a bleak routine, and made my heart burst. Renee Ahdieh is a rare storyteller. So I can't really disagree with that statement, mostly because I do think that her writing is absolutely gorgeous, and that's one of the things that I remember from this book, but I just felt like her writing style and her just the way that she writes wasn't enough to save it from being kind of boring. I felt like the writing was there, but the plot was just lacking, and it just wasn't really something that was keeping me interested in actually finishing the story, which I think I ended up reading maybe halfway through the book, so I got pretty far into it. It just wasn't something that was going to keep my interest. So this one has a first reading reaction, and that was, holy crap, what a fantastically captivating tale. And then her reread was, still amazing, can't wait to read the next one. Which I think is good. I love the covers of these books, so I feel like that's kind of why I was drawn to this book, because it was just so beautiful, and the story sounded really interesting because I love retellings or adaptions or whatever you want to call them. And I love the cover of the second book as well, so it kind of makes me want to read the first book just so I can get to the second book. Here's another review, and it says, I think this just replaced ACOTAR as my #1 book of the year. Yes, you heard me right. There is so much right about this book. The world building is great, the smaller magical elements are phenomenal, and the characters are on par. I loved it so much, and I'm so pumped there will be more story. I just think that's really interesting how much people love this book, because it just goes to show how different people's tastes are and how varied they are. And I think that's something that I really love about this community, is that there are so many different opinions, and not everyone is going to like or dislike the same books as you do. So I think that's super interesting, and just seeing the way that people react to this book in the complete opposite way that I reacted to this book is just so interesting. And I love to learn about why people love this book, but I haven't really found any reviews specifically why, except for her writing style, which I totally agree with, because that was the best part of the book for me. But I just, I don't know, I didn't find the characters all that interesting. I didn't find the plot all that interesting. And there are certain elements of the plot that have really stuck with me, but overall it just didn't feel like it had a lot of direction, and I didn't like the way that there was kind of 2 separate stories happening at the same time that didn't really seem to have any connection with each other. It was just a really strange experience reading this book and not really understanding what was going on. Okay, so the next book that I'm going to be reading reviews from is Truth Witch by Susan Dennard, and the reason that I DNF'd this book in the first place was because there was a lot of fat phobia in the beginning. I think I got maybe 50 pages of the way into the book, maybe either more or less, but there was just some fat phobia that I just wasn't really comfortable with, and I wasn't sure if I would enjoy the rest of the book. And it wasn't really my intention to completely DNF this book. I just haven't ever gotten back to it. And I think I tried to read this book earlier in the year and it just hasn't happened. I haven't been compelled to pick this book back up and try to read it. So yeah, that's basically why I DNF'd it and why I haven't picked it back up yet. Okay, so here is a review from Sarah J. Maas, and this is Make Room on Your All-Time Favorite Shelf. Truth Witch is an instant new classic. It reminded me of why I started reading fantasy in the first place. Its fierce and vibrant world, richly drawn characters, and dazzling intrigue harkens to the best of Megan Whalen Turner, Robin Hobb, and Jacqueline Carey. And while it pays homage to the epic fantasies that have come before it, it also lays the foundation for a bright new chapter in the genre. I think that that's really interesting. I didn't really find anything super exciting or different about Truth Witch. It felt pretty run-of-the-mill. It reminded me a little bit of Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes, and I don't know which one came first or whatever. I don't think it really matters. I just feel like they're both kind of similar books. So Truth Witch wasn't really something that was completely different for me, especially since I read Falling Kingdoms before I tried to read Truth Witch. So it didn't really seem very unique or different. Now here's another review. This says, I really love this book. It's probably the first very hyped book that has gone so far above and beyond my expectations that I can't even deal. Six of Crows is another, but this one even above that for me. That's so interesting because I absolutely love Six of Crows, and like that book, I don't feel like any book that I've read thus far has exceeded my love for Six of Crows. So that's really interesting that this person loves Truth Witch even more than Six of Crows. Here's another one. It says, although the world building was a bit confusing and clunky at the beginning, Truth Witch more than made up for that with its characters, twists, and turns. Rarely do I feel so instantly attached to an entire group of characters like I did with this book. Even before I originally got this arc at BEA, I'm glad I waited to read it because I cannot imagine having to wait over a year for the next installment. I definitely agree that the world building felt really clunky in the beginning. Like, it was just a lot of info dumping and also a lot of just mentioning things that the author kind of expected you to know, and you don't really know this beforehand. So there's just a lot of info that was really confusing and came out of nowhere and had no real explanation. So it was just kind of dumped all on you, and it was weird and it was really hard to follow. And I just kind of figured, oh, maybe this was just like kind of like a more adult leaning YA fantasy, if that makes sense. Because I feel like in a lot of more adult fantasy that kind of happens a lot. They just kind of expect you to know things. And in YA, it's a little more explained. A lot of the information has more description to it, so that didn't really happen in Truth Witch, so that is kind of something that turned me off a little bit on this book, but I tried to kind of, push through all of that so maybe I could, pick up things on the way, but I obviously didn't get that far into the book. Okay, we're gonna move on to An Ember in the Ashes, and this is the last book that I'm gonna do for this video, and this is the book that I have really tried to go back and forth about reading this book again, because I think I got about 200 pages into it and I felt like nothing was happening. I didn't really care about the characters. I didn't care about the plot. The relationship hadn't even begun yet. It was so slow burn, and it wasn't even slow burn. It was just that it took almost 200 pages for the two characters to even meet. I legitimately can't remember anything that happens in the first 200 pages. It was just a lot of nothing, and I felt like a lot of that could have already been done or could have been condensed, and we didn't really need all of that information. But I mean, I'm not the writer. I do think that Sabata here is a really good writer. I absolutely loved her writing style. I just didn't like how her pacing was just way too slow and way too awkward. It just didn't feel right. But I mean, I think that this is her first book, so I totally get it. It's not going to be perfect or amazing, but I just felt like the pacing was just not there and the plot was just not completely constructed in like a way that was going to make sense. Okay, so here's a review. It says, An Ember in the Ashes is truly a unique and captivating book that I recommend everyone reads. Cannot wait for the second book in the series. Here's another one. Sometimes you read a book and you know instantly this is going to be huge. Whether it's the quality of the writing, the freshness of the premise, the way it piggybacks onto something already immensely popular, or just a case of right time, right zeitgeist, you just know. And this book is going to be a star. And it should be. This book is a perfect example of crossover YA. There's nothing juvenile about it, and it will have broad appeal to adults as well as teens. It has fantastic world building, complex characters, gripping action, and it's frequently surprising, and it doesn't shy from the horrific. Maybe I just didn't get far enough into the book. I mean, I read the first 200 pages, and I feel like if none of that happens in the first 200 pages, then it doesn't really matter if it's gonna happen in the next 200. You know what I mean? It's not a super long book. I've read longer fantasy than that book. So I feel like if you're still not there at 200 pages, it's not going to be worth it. And I know this book is immensely popular. People truly love this book, and I really wish that I could love it as well. It just wasn't my kind of fantasy. I felt like it was just a little too long, and it just felt a little too rambly in the beginning of like, it didn't really have direction, and a lot of the characters were still pretty wishy-washy. They hadn't really gotten to that point in their plots or in their character arcs of, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm determined, this is, you know, this is happening. It was too much of like, I don't know where I belong on this thing, on this journey, I don't know where I'm going, you know. It just didn't feel like it had enough direction, and I really wish it did, because it could have been so amazing, and it definitely could have been one of my favorites. It just didn't go there enough for me. It didn't push itself far enough. Here's another review. It's a pretty short one. There are too many things I loved about this book. Every character was so wonderfully complex, each page more addictive than the last, too much perfection. That's really interesting. I just didn't feel that sort of way about this book. I feel like that's just kind of like a theme within this video, is that I just didn't feel the same way. Like, I just didn't have that same experience of feeling so addicted to this book. I felt like every single page of this book was kind of a struggle for me. It was just like I had to push myself forward and forward and forward, and it stopped being a pleasurable experience. It ended up feeling more like homework and more like something I was forcing myself to do in order to understand why everyone loved this thing, rather than, oh, I inherently love this thing, this automatically speaks to me and I love it. It wasn't that anymore, so I just couldn't really get through this book, and I feel so sad and so bad about saying that. It wasn't a book for me. So overall, I feel like all of these books, I still feel pretty justified in not really enjoying them, and I don't really feel like I've been super convinced in picking any of them up. So if you do want to try to convince me, do that below in the comment section, and I would love to hear you guys and your thoughts and opinions on these books if you truly love them, because I do want to try to maybe get back into one or two of them, but I'm just not sure. I'm still pretty much on the fence. But this was really interesting, getting to hear other people's perspectives on things that I didn't like but they liked, because basically we read the same book, we just had different experiences with the same book, and that is really based on so many different things like experiences and biases and just reading tastes in general. So I feel like it's just gonna be a varied experience for really anyone. It was super interesting to see everyone's opinions, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video as well. And if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and go ahead and follow my Instagram, my Twitter, and my Goodreads, and also my blog if you want to. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!